Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Elevate Your Equity podcast, where investors with a special emphasis on couples begin, continue, and deepen their journey to financial freedom together using the powerful vehicle of real estate investing to do it. Today, we have a very awesome conversation with Randy. Randy is the president of InvestArc Properties, LLC, focusing on creating investor value and passive income returns for the busy professional. He's been in multifamily real estate since 2014 as both a general partner and a key sponsor, and has had 250 doors and a limited partner exposure of over 4,000 doors. His company offers the busy professional who want to include multifamily in their portfolio, partner with experts who are aligned with investment goals. He was previously a private money lender in the remodeling of single-family homes in Florida, Ohio, Texas, and much of other markets across the state. And he started with a value of over $2.5 million, which he grew in the single family space. He has since then represented over $11 million in assets managed in multifamily and serves as the chief compliance and audit officer for a large academic medical institution in Houston. He's got a bachelor's degree in accounting, information systems, and an MBA in finance, and is also a non-active CPA. But most importantly, he's a husband and a father of 4 adult children, spending his free time analyzing deals and networking with others. And we had a fantastic time talking today with Randy. We talked about the difference between investing and speculation, how he was able to carry some of his natural talents from his W-2 work into the investing space, and what the conversations were like at home when he was investing while starting off with his wife. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. So let's bring on Randy. All right. And Randy, we are here. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's a pleasure to have you here. How are you today?
Derek and Sophie, I am great. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks so much for having me, and look forward to hopefully adding some value to your listeners.
Of course. Thank you so much. First of all, we always like to start off with our guests on how they got started investing in real estate. And, I've already introduced you to the audience, and you have quite an extensive background that goes back for quite some time. But maybe give us a taste for how you got interested in real estate from the beginning, and we'll go from there.
So yeah, I've been at it 7 years now. Started in the 7th year, and I got started when currently based in Houston. Came to Houston in 2013, and I came from the Cleveland, Ohio market. And at the time, I had a brother-in-law who had gotten displaced. He was a JD and MBA and a very intelligent man, and he came to me and wanted me to start flipping houses with him in South Florida. And kind of an entrepreneur spirit, and we always had a bent. And I said, "You're crazy. You're going to give people money in South Florida to buy a house, and we're going to trust them to do this?" And then he proceeded to tell me that, well, to really leverage this, you really need to develop a self-directed IRA. And I remember looking at him a second time and saying, "You're doubly nuts. I'm not going to put, from an investment philosophy, that's not something people would recommend you do." So long and short of it is I partnered with him. We became very comfortable. We flipped 15 plus houses down there, made some really good money. And I came to Houston. I looked at real estate investment groups in Houston, and there were, like, at the time, 13 different real estate investment groups. In Cleveland, Ohio, there was one, and just showing the difference in the metro markets. And so my family was still in Ohio as we transitioned down here for business purposes. I went to every one of them every night of the week. And I fell into basically lifestyles, and I went to their annual expo, heard Brad Sumrock talk about multifamily there. And I fell in love with non-recourse. I had looked at buying businesses and doing some of that. The non-recourse aspect was the big aha moment for me, that I can buy multi-million-dollar assets and not have any personal liability. And from there, I never looked back. So that's the start of it.
That's great. Thank you so much. It seems so natural that you'd step into it. Now, I know that along a lot of these points in the road, there must have been many, many points in time where there were internal resistance, right? You're thinking, there's no way this could work, or how can this work? Like, this just seems too good to be true. And if you come from an engineering background like I do, when something sounds too good to be true, it often is. Yeah. And so can you talk us through how you overcame some of those obstacles early on in the path?
Yeah, so I think you're right. You're an engineer. I'm a finance guy at heart, and we're both very analytical, risk adverse. I would say that I'm a risk adverse person. So I think there's the two learning points for me was when I was in the Brad Sumrock organization. He draws a triangle, and you might have heard of the mindset at the top of the triangle, methods and mentorship. There's three big bullet points. And for me, it was that mindset piece. It was the mindset piece to see that this is something I can do. This isn't something that requires a lot of intelligence, because I don't mean that negatively, but have been many go before us on this path. And as one mentor told me, it's not brain surgery, it's just following the recipe and consistency and persistency and staying at it. So that was the first big intellectual hurdle I had to get over. I guess the next one was in my mind of when I invested in my first passive investment, of writing that check and my hand shaking for $50,000, being a risk adverse person, to say, but I had done the education, I had been involved, I had taken the right steps. And so in my day job, I talk about risk mitigation. And so you take those risk mitigation steps, you educate yourself, you're buying with a sponsor who's done it before. You're getting long-term debt. You're not buying in the hood, and some of those fundamental things to reduce your risk. And so those were the two big hurdles for me. I think as probably most people would do, writing that first check.
That's fantastic. What would you say during those times, right, where you felt those two specific points in time? Was there any type of emotion that you could put your finger on that was coming up, or any memories or anything specific that was really causing you to question your decision at the time?
I think the first one, when I heard the mindset, the triangle with the mindset, methods and mentorship, because there's a lot of self-help going on in that thinking, and that I can conquer anything. And that's a hurdle that, because of my analytical mindset, I probably wouldn't buy into. I was an athlete as a kid and did a lot of the rah-rah stuff in athletics, kids athletics. But as an adult, I tend to steer away from those emotional rah-rah moments of let's go get them. But you really have to see yourself with a mindset. For me, it was the mindset that this is something I can do. You have to see, it's the visualization of you owning an asset. It's the visualization of you being your name on the dotted line and you being the person that's getting the calls. And that didn't scare me, that piece of it. But that was the big hurdle of realizing that I can do this. Maybe I didn't have a good self-image, or I have a poor self-image, but I think it was more or less just evolution. Writing a check was just pure fear.
Yes, of course. I think we've all had that, right? And because you have the fear, you have knowledge, right? But you don't actually, like, you've heard it in theory, but
Yeah.
people tend to trust more the experience, right? Because if you've done it before, then it makes sense. But if this is your first time doing it, and especially $50,000 is quite a bit of money for most people, right? Especially when they're getting started in the space, that often represents a significant part of their net worth or their nest egg for saving, right? And
Right.
when you hand it off to someone and you don't know exactly, like, you know what it will be like in theory, but you don't actually know for sure. You're like, this is what it should be like. It's very hard. It's very difficult to kind of overcome some of that. So I have to commend you for making that first step. And
Well, I'm a little bit of chicken. I got to interrupt you just to say I'm a little
yeah,
bit of a chicken, because that first one, I remember that on the risk mitigation vein, I learned that I was using a self-directed IRA. And so you can create a trust for investors within an IRA or an LLC, that you don't have to have $50,000. You can have two people with 25, or five people with 10. There are ways to achieve that investment without the 50,000. So my first action one was 25, but still,
yeah.
I wasn't going to be on the breadline if I lost it, but it's still on that finance risk mitigation line. It was not something that I had readily done a lot in my life, put it that way.
Of course. Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. And so Randy, as I heard you talk about earlier, you were to these real estate investing meetings and clubs, like you said, every day of the week when you were first starting out. How involved was your wife, and what kind of conversations were you guys
Yeah.
having, and what did she think of your love affair with real estate at the time?
That's a great question. At the time, it was very convenient for me, as I said, because I was living in Houston. She was still in Ohio. We had about a 3-4 month process, temporary living, while we were getting situated. So it was really easy for me to just head first into real estate. while she wasn't around. But she is very supportive, kind of envy you two that have the relationship that both love real estate. She has other interests, and we've been married a long time, but she is very supportive of me and allows me to spend a lot of nights, weekends, and other times without questioning that, doing this stuff, underwriting deals, going to visit properties, stuff that syndicators do. So I couldn't do it without her, because I know there are people that simply spouse situations aren't as amicable, and real estate isn't worth a marriage in my mind. So if she didn't, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, that's very well said. And that's exactly that we really, really expand on here and really try to emphasize, is that the common vision, right? Like having
Yeah.
a vision between husband and wife, whoever's doing the investing, or whoever's even supporting the investor, it's really important that both spouses are on the same page. Maybe can you take us to a time where maybe you two had a conversation about that? Maybe was there a light bulb moment that you both had that said, boy, if we started investing, we can create this passive income, or we can create the lives that we want. Maybe can you take us to what that
Yeah.
conversation was like, and how early on was that?
I think that probably started back in the single family days, but it transitioned as the numbers got bigger and the investments got bigger in multifamily. But I think for me, it was always wanting to make sure, my wife's name is Melanie, that Melanie understood what we were doing and that she bought off on it. At least in theory. She was never going to look at a spreadsheet. She was never going to calculate IRR or look at cash on cash returns. As a guy that's been married a long time, I want her approval. I want her directional approval that she buys into it. And I've found that, quite honestly, ladies have a lot more instincts than do guys, or at least this guy sometimes, especially when it comes to relationships and partners. I trust her a lot to go out to dinner with somebody or whatever and just say, yeah, or really? I don't think you should. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Well, she instinctively has that, because this guy sees what he wants to see. And I think I see the return, I see the IRR, I see the payback, et cetera, et cetera. And she looks more at the quality of the person or their integrity, reading through that. She's just much better at it. So for us, the bottom line is I look at it as me for a way to market the deal to Melanie. And if I get her approval, which she always pretty much has, because she basically is very kind and listens, and she asks a few questions and then she goes, well, it sounds like you've crossed all the T's and dotted the I's, and why, I have nothing further to add. And fortunately, as I find some wood to knock on, we haven't had any ones that really have gone sour yet. So it is really, really important for me, and I know you guys agree, whether your spouse, man or woman, is actively or passively supporting you. It's both of your monies. If I lose it, she's got to live with the consequences.
That's
so
right.
It's very important.
Yeah. Now, I want to drill into this a little bit more. Maybe this is actually a two-part question. I can't help myself. The first question is, has there been any time where she's prevented you or prevented like a potential bad type of investment? Or was there something that she was able to help curb or like change the direction of an investment to avoid some pitfalls? That's one. Actually, you know what? I'll start with that, and then I'll ask the second question after I get your response.
You're going to challenge my memory here, Derek. I'm a feeble man. I don't remember her ever saying no. I don't remember her ever saying no, because she knows I'm a very analytical person and very risk adverse. So I think that's the foundation of a lot of her trust over the years we've developed. Plus, as I said, there haven't been any losers. I think she has asked questions off and on over investments. I remember the first multifamily deal I invested in, I dragged her to Port Arthur, Texas, which is about 2 hours east of Houston. So we made a Saturday road trip to go visit the property we were going to visit in. And it was B-, C+ area. And if you know anything about Port Arthur, it's a very blue collar town, very transparent. I didn't know any of this at the time. I was new to Texas in my first multifamily, and I just knew the sponsor. And I remember asking questions about the neighborhood, the quality, who would live here. And I tried to preempt her, honey, trust me, this is a place that we would never live in before we got there. It's not going to be that kind of place. That's a class A. This is the class B minus C plus. But she asked very probing questions, and she asked about the relationship with the sponsor and how I knew him and how I'd come to gain comfort with him. To me, it's practicing the marketing of the pitch that as a GP, you're going to do with every investor. I found that if I can't convince her, then something's wrong.
Yeah, that's great. I love that. Thank you. And I think that being able to do that in the safety of your guys' relationship is good, especially if you have a foundation of trust built up, which, that takes time to build up, right? Like there's deeper things beyond that, right? That comes in, because sometimes in some unhealthy relationships, there may not be the trust there, and maybe there's fear, like maybe one spouse is afraid of the other, or one can steamroll over the other, or maybe there's just a dynamic there where no one cares, right? Or the other partner just doesn't care, right? Or doesn't understand the consequences. And so I
I'm
think
sure
that's,
you've seen some examples of that.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
like I said.
And so I think it's really important to have that solid foundation to where you can have that conversation about things that may potentially happen to your guys' money and your guys' future. So I think that's really great that you guys have that. So I want to acknowledge you for building that, because that is not something to take for granted.
Well, like you, Derek, I married up in life.
That's right. This right here is my far better half. There's no choice. One question before I let Sophie take over with some questions, because I know she wants to ask some as well. But
Okay.
for me, what did that look like when you were pitching a property to your wife? What did that look like? Because many people on that I'm listening to are asking the question, how can I get my spouse to buy in? And
Yeah.
they may have found a property, but what does it look like? What are some of the basic things that you say during the pitch to your wife that maybe some of our listeners can
I
take with
think
them?
he's asking for his own notes.
I'm going to go ahead and I'm not an expert at the Constitution, but there's the Fifth Amendment that I'd like to read to right now.
Well, let me tell you first how not to do it, Derek.
Okay, perfect.
Things not to do. I can tell you, then I can talk about things to do. But things not to do are to get off the phone at 9 o'clock at night after you've had on a call with a bunch of opportunities, and you've done 5 hours of spreadsheet analysis and the IRRs at this and the cash flows at this and the equity multipliers at this, to run out into the room and want to talk about it right away and say, can we talk? I get this great deal, and this is what it's all about. And at 9:30 at night, we're all, at least we are around our house, fairly comatose, and that is not the way to do it. Nor the other way to do it is to wake up the first thing in the morning when you haven't brushed your teeth yet and try to talk about it. So those are two lessons. Not that I have done either of those, but I would advise your listeners not to do that. So I think the way we as a couple have just worked it out is we go for a lot of walks together. I used to be a runner, my knees deteriorated, and so now I go for long walks, and we truly enjoy walking together. That's the optimal time for me to discuss something like that, is to bounce it off her when there's no distractions. We're out of the household. She doesn't have our son to worry about, or the dynamics of that, and that's optimal. Other times would be I have called her midday from work, and said, because I have a W-2 job still, and on the W-2 job, talking while I have 10 or 15 minutes, and she's got 20 minutes to at least lay the foundation for a later discussion. But those are some of the principles. I'd concentrate more on the don'ts than the find your own sweet pot of the do's. What's Sophie's love language? Is it 8 o'clock in the morning or noon or whatever? So
yeah, I'm still trying to find the language at any language at 8 in the morning. So, but anyways, what I wanted to ask though is like, let's say that you have the conditions there. You guys are on the walk. You've created the space. What are the actual questions? Like, where do you start with the conversation? Do you talk about, oh, there's this deal that I'm looking at, or there's this property that I'm looking at. I think it's got potential because X, Y, Z. How would you just generally approach that? Not to drill down even further, but I think this is something that most listeners really want to understand.
Yeah, and I've been married a long time. For those who haven't been married as long, I would say, one, it's important, whatever time it takes, whether it's a day or a week or 3 months, and if you lose the deal, the opportunity, there's always another deal right behind it. Because if you don't get that mutual support, at least in my personal life, I would say there's just no deal worth that that gap that you can build between two people. I think when we're on the walk, I would start out with really just a very high level, just talking about where the deal is and who the deal sponsor is. I've talked about several, but over the time she has begun to pick up names of who I'm dealing with and what I'm doing. So she gets the names. She knows once there's a name, like I'll say, do you remember X? Oh, yeah. Well, he's got this deal or she's got this deal, and in Arizona, Phoenix, Houston, wherever. And then it's just really a high level discussion about why it's a good deal, what I like about it. I do talk about some of the returns. I try to draw to her. I recently as an investor, I got involved in a fund, a self-storage and a mobile home park fund versus a multifamily syndication. And so I was trying to explain why that was good, why I thought that was good. If she were on the phone tonight, or on that podcast, she would never admit it, but she's gotten a lot of knowledge about multifamily just through osmosis in our discussions. And then she asked some questions, and it's not a 20-minute drill down. It's more like a 7 to maybe 10-minute conversation at a high level, because we all have our personalities are all different. Husbands and wives generally opposites attract, and we're in that category, but we're much more alike than we are different. So
Yeah, thank you so much, Randy, for giving us a sneak peek behind the curtains. I think this is really valuable for our listeners simply because, again, a lot of them are couples and new investors. And so oftentimes, as you kind of alluded to earlier, like, finances, and if we're not on the same page, can be the origin of a lot of future issues. And so, again, just hearing this from someone who has such a successful real estate career and in such a successful marriage, I think it's very, very valuable. And the question that I wanted to ask was, looking back in your real estate journey, what were some of the toughest moments you faced? And I know we touched upon mindset earlier on. And if you can talk about what that tough moment was and how you really pushed yourself through it.
yeah, I think Sophie, I would just say I really maybe I had a poor self-image, but I just didn't. You go to these conferences and you see all these people that are rich and successful and got 20 deals and they can raise $5 million in an hour on a phone call or whatever. And I had to remind myself that you have to walk before you can run. And yes, and there's a lot of people that get educated and never invest in any deals. And so to me, the basis of getting over that mindset hurdle was education. Hanging in big educational groups. There's so many wonderful meetups today. There's books. I just got really engrossed in education, and I still do. I've been doing this for I'll read. I'll read anything real estate before I read a fiction book or something like that. And that education continues on forever. So it's not something that you ever arrive at, because piece for me was the next piece was really when I became a GP for the first time and had to get really involved in operations. Most of the big mentor groups, they don't really teach a lot about operations, how to asset manage. And we had catastrophe. And so the short story there I would share is that, and back to the spousal thing too, like we bought a 1965 flat roof chiller boiler property as our first deal. And that was the one that everybody would tell you never to do. Never, listeners, don't buy a flat roof chiller boiler property. Or have you already, Derek?
Yes. So we did. We did do that. And that was back in 2018. So
Okay.
luckily we had the momentum of market forces behind us to kind of save and pick up the slack a little bit. But we'll get into that a little bit later on. I don't want to detract from your story.
No, but it's so you had the same lesson I had. We had a very positive story, but in the middle of winter, when the boiler goes out and people are worried about heat in Texas, when there's not a lot of heat to have, and your spouse says, the right thing to do, Randy, is you got to get heat to them no matter what the cost. She's absolutely right, and we did. But there's another spousal reminder to do the right thing versus the analytical guy thing who may want to start reducing expenses. but there's a responsibility to the tenants as well as to the investors. And so the investors may have to wait a little bit if their distribution isn't going to be as hefty because we had to get some other means in there to heat. But anyhow, that's the
Yeah.
short story.
I think that this is one of the cool things about real estate investing, right? I mean, I guess it depends on your perspective, but you basically have the livelihood of many families in your hands. And when you're given that responsibility, it's something that you've got to do, right? So I'm completely in alignment with, at one time I was in alignment with you on that decision, and then now I'm completely in alignment with what your wife was saying there. And I think that that's the growth mindset. That's the mindset that really
Yeah.
fosters sustainable growth. Because if you have upset tenants, the way that you treat your tenants is also going to be the way that you're going to treat your staff if it came down to it. And if your staff are treated that way, then your investors will eventually start getting treated that way. And so there's no line that you're willing to draw. So by having the integrity to step up and say, this is something that if I was in their shoes, it's unacceptable. We have to do that just to be good stewards of people's family experience and being, their lives. Then you can see right now how it's that perspective, even though it hurt at the time, it's generated returns for you, right? Because you've learned it, you went through the hard times, you said, okay, I won't make that mistake again. And now you can take that lesson to increase your returns later because now people know who you are as a person and what your product is. Does that make sense?
Sure does. And it sounds like you've lived with a few chiller boiler problems.
Yeah, there was some issues. I had a property that we picked up in 2018 that was a D class property in a C plus B minus area, and it took
Okay.
us 2 years to stabilize that thing. But once we did, we were able to refinance and pull out all of our original cash and pay off the original lender and some private notes
Nice.
we took out, and it was a real tester for sure. And it was also a flat roof that we had to replace. And so, yeah, there was a lot of stuff there that we had to do, but we had to do it because the people that were living in there are human beings, and we have to treat them with respect, and we got to treat all of our people that we work with in every function of the building with respect,
Right.
because that will expand outward. And who you are, that is the most important thing. It's your values that you're carrying with you from property to property.
And you and I can sleep in. I mean, I went through the great freeze here in Texas without heat for 2 days, but tenants will give you a lot of slack if they know you got their back and you're trying to do things. And so the point of that story is yeah, we were able to spend the money, get the heat back on. The short answer is we doubled the investors' money in 21 months, and it all had a positive ending. But you're right, the greed factor can kick in, and it's more than just money.
Right. 100%. Thank you.
I'm just curious, Randy, and that you can answer this in any way you like, but is there anything about real estate investing, in all the time that you've done it, that still surprises and delights you?
That delights me and surprises me.
Still, after all these years?
I'm gonna have to confess, I'm kind of a nerd. So when I get a penciling to work on a property today, when I'm penciling something and trying to find an opportunity, that it still gives me kicks and giggles. It truly does, because then it's like we can make this happen. Like the little kid in the candy store. Writing the thing that was one of the greatest joys for me was writing checks back to investors. That's way cool. Of paying them back.
Yeah, that's amazing. I can totally visualize that as well. Right now, I've been doing a bunch of JVs, and I dream of the day that I'm able to refinance a property, and you put it under a bridge loan, and then you refinance the property and give the investors back 70% or more of what they put into the property, and yet they keep their equity. That's really something special. Once you hit that infinite rate of return mark for the investors, that's what's really cool for me.
You've got an investor for life then.
That's right, 100%.
When you can
Yeah.
do that.
Excellent. So let's talk a little bit more about another side that you briefly mentioned, but I wanted to make sure we gave credit to, because this is something that also a lot of people can relate with. You have a W-2 job. You're still working a W-2. I know that in some of the conversations that we had before this podcast, I understand why, but maybe we can dive into a little bit behind the balance between working a W-2 and doing all this amazing thing that you're doing. I mean, you were flipping houses back 7 years ago, and then now you found yourself into multifamily investing. So there's an educational hurdle, and you have kids at home. So you have all these things going on at the same time. Let's talk a little bit about the balance and how you're able to work W-2 and study up. Maybe you can say a few things, advise the audience on how to make that balance happen, if there is any.
My smart aleck answer is the one I think I shared with you in the past. I truly still enjoy my day job, and I generally mean that. I won't do it forever, but I do enjoy it, and I'm at a position where I lead a team, and so I truly enjoy that. I often said that when I coach in the Rod Khleif's organization today, and people want to go full time, go big, go fast, and that's great. But I generally try to encourage them. You don't quit your day job until you can replace that income. And so that may be, if you're making 50,000 and you're making $200,000, it's a big hurdle there, a difference. And so what's your objective here? And I truly think this is something you can do both. Yes, I work a lot of nights and weekends. That's by choice. That's not anybody telling me I have to, my W-2 guy. But, we all work in your W-2 today. You're carrying a phone, you're networked. If I wasn't doing real estate, I'd probably be coming home and doing my W-2 stuff. So it's just, I enjoy work. I don't ever really want to retire. Yes, I want to change directions from the corporate world and do this more full time. I enjoy it. And I think it's just a matter of, I go back to the spouse. I realize there's many times I'm working late at night and it doesn't say, okay, you got to shut down and go spend some time with Melanie, because back to the basics, that's important for us and me. And then it's a matter of, can I get in 3 more emails before I go home from the office, or I'm in the office, and can I do 1 more spreadsheet, or make 1 more phone call, and using the time when I'm in the car to calling brokers and talking to brokers. Like everybody in Houston, I have a commute, so I try to maximize that time. But if you enjoy it, it's not work. When I was a kid, I loved to play basketball. I'd play basketball all day, every day. That wasn't work. And neither is this. So my father once said, find something you love to do and you never have to work a day in your life. Whether it's real estate or some other hobby, find something that you're passionate about. And
yeah, thank you for explaining that. I definitely can relate with this, because when I first started learning about real estate investing, it kind of became all consuming for me, because in my book, I mentioned how real estate investing, especially passive, when you buy houses, they're like little Lego blocks, right? Like you spend the money to buy these little Lego blocks. And as soon as you have it, you can start to use it to build things, right? You can build a wall, you can build whatever you want, and you can stack them up. And as soon as you get more, these Lego bricks will help attract more Lego bricks. And so you can start to build whatever you want to build, right? But what happened there is that I got to a point where I got more in love with real estate investing than spending time with Sophie at the time, or at least that's the way that Sophie had pictured it, right? And
the
so,
perception, yeah.
yeah. And so in your case, how were you able to say, okay, this call is done. Like that's enough. It's time to cut it off. Like, was there an internal voice that kind of goes off, or do you look at your clock and say this is too long? Or maybe you can speak a little bit about how to pull the plug.
I generally try to cut off by 9 o'clock at night is the one, because after 8-10 hours in the day job and then coming home, my mental capacity just doesn't have the focus that it once did much past 9 o'clock. So that's kind of my cutoff. And then I really try to make it, we try to find time for a walk, whether it's 5 minutes. Tonight, we just, I was working the day job until about 5:30, and I had to do this phone call at 7:30, 7 o'clock. I said, let's go out and grab a bite to eat. She was doing stuff all day and I was doing stuff, and anyhow, let's just grab a bite. So there's no secret recipe. It's just a matter of following your heart and making sure that that's a priority for you. And if I can just take a moment to speak to the guys in the audience. The guys in the audience are the ones that I relate to the best, because and we're all, and I go back to, we see the deal. We love the chase. We love the thrill of victory. And we go after it at sometimes all costs. And it's not till you really look back and see some of the damage that you've inflicted that you begin to develop some of that balance, as you said. So guys particularly, I think, need to be cautious. Maybe it's just because I'm a guy, but take care of your spouses.
Yeah, I can totally relate with that. Is there anything you wanted to say?
Thank you for that, Randy. Thank you for.
You can pay me later, Sophie, for saying that.
I'll Venmo you.
No, that's all genuine. It truly was. It really was. From a guy that's made many mistakes in life as well.
And I think, again, for the young couples, for the new couples, for people who've been married however many years. So from personal experience, I understand because I did take it personally. And now, years later, I'm like, oh, wait a second. To understand the male mindset and the fact that if you're trying to protect and build a vision and you're doing it at all costs, then it's really for the sake of the
Mhm.
family and for the sake of the relationship. So it took me some time to even understand that perspective. So,
Well,
yeah.
guys are also really great at justifying their own behaviors. And so we justify that I'm doing this for the family. I'm doing this for you, Sophie, or Melanie, or our kids, or our future kids, or whatever. What do you mean? I'm doing it for, a good cause. But
Yeah, what are you guys
um,
doing it for?
there's, again, guys see what they want to see and are sometimes have these blinders on that are just tunnel visions. At least, and again, I'm speaking to this guy, maybe not all guys, but be aware of your vulnerabilities, I guess, is another thing there. And to be aware of, if you have that relationship as a high priority, it's going to be much easier to do. If you have, what's your why in real estate? If your why is to be filthy rich, there's going to be some damages along the way in your relationships. If your why is more modest, whatever that might be, you're going to be much more successful in a balanced, successful way.
Yeah, thank you. Again, there's so much wisdom because this is, of course, when we talk to our investors, it's more than just the front facing transactional nature. It's really understanding the richer journey behind the investor.
Mhm.
Again, thank you. You've shared a lot of like personal stories and vulnerabilities, and we really, really value and appreciate you for being so open with us and our audience. There's just many layers of the whole investing journey. And yeah.
And you've used that key word in my mind, but it's a journey. So it's a marathon. It's so many people get into it and want to quit their W-2 job in 6 days, 6 weeks, or 6 months, or it's a journey. It's a marathon. Take the long view. You don't have to get rich quick overnight. You just have to get rich quick over a lifetime.
Yeah, 100%. That's something that we all teach our investors is that the way to wealth in real estate is like a crock pot, not the microwave. You got to sit there and you
Great
got to let
illustration.
all the components kind of sit there and marinate for a very long time. But the longer you let it marinate, the better it's going to taste, right? So that's the way that I like to put it. Now,
Very well put.
I wanted to back up a little bit and I wanted to ask you guys, we've been talking about vision and why, we've been talking about balance and W-2 and, trusting your spouse and that foundation there in the relationship to
Mhm.
gain success. What is Randy's big why or vision for the next 3 to 5 years? What is moving you through to do all this action?
I guess it starts with the why of my greater why is just that I want to give back and create a legacy, and made a commitment to some big charitable commitments that I want to honor. And the why is because I have that high energy and low IQ that I want to continue on working. I'll step away from the corporate world one day, but I want to do this full time. And for me, full time, you can probably relate, Derek. If I did something 35 hours a week, that would be part time for me compared to the W-2 job and the other things today. So to me, there's just plenty enough space in it. I play golf. I love golf, but I can't imagine playing golf 3 or 4 times a week. That would just bore me. And to those who play golf 3 or 4 times a week, that's great. If that's your passion, if that's what you enjoy. But I hope for a long time to come that I'm out chasing deals, building more relationships, and it's just not work. So, and if you have the investor's mindset and you have the investor, I think as a GP, when I put on my GP hat, I'm a much better GP because I have been an LP in so many opportunities, and I've seen good, bad, and ugly, and I just take other people's money very seriously.
Yeah, that's great. And I think people understand that too. People respect that. They understand that, especially when you're talking with them and you sit down with them and teach them like what I imagine you do when you sit down with your investors and you say, well, this might not be the right fit for your investment right now or for your personal journey. There's those conversations that need to be had and people can feel that. That's when you really earn a very loyal customer, a
Yeah.
very loyal investor. And that's where it all is. Like, this is all about relationships. And Something that that I've learned, and maybe you can comment on this, is that when you start investing in real estate in this way, you're really looking to build relationships. And the very cool thing about this is that you get to invest with people that you enjoy being with. If you're going to be a lead investor who is cutthroat and doesn't play well with others, then this is a team sport, and it's probably not the right
Right.
fit, right? Because you got to be someone that gets along and wants to help other people genuinely, because you all win together, right? So I wanted to hear your comment on that, if you agree with that, and maybe how you've been able to integrate that in some of your offerings.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, 100% agree. As you started out, people invest with those they know, like, and trust. Very simply, as you've heard. Back to your illustration, I think we've all gone to a car mechanic where you feel they're upselling you to something, or then you've gone to another car mechanic who has told you, you really don't need this fixed now. It'll last another 50,000 miles. I don't know about you guys, but I certainly respect and I'm going to go back to the one who told me I didn't really need to fix it now. So that translates into investing. The same thing you just said, as you talk to investors, you can say, after you talk to them, one guy told me, Randy, all I need is a 5 or 6% return. I don't need the high, the 2-3 multiple at the end, to which I kind of went, really? But he had maintained, or he had achieved financial success, and he was just looking for a return. And so that's one type of investor. And so, and that's why you have a lot of different capital stacks evolving today for different types of investors. But yeah, you have to understand. I just had a call with one before this podcast who reached out to me something totally different. She wanted to talk about a backdoor Roth. And so I spent 15 minutes talking to her about backdoor Roth and said, when can we do lunch again, just to get reacquainted? I haven't got a deal on the table yet, but I want to make sure you're there. So relationships are key. It's a huge team. It's a huge team sport. And I've also been, as an LP, I've talked to a couple of sponsors that were too busy to take my calls or too busy to answer my questions. And I said, okay, that's fine. But that's not for me. To your point, as your passive investors out there is no dumb question. And if a GP or a sponsor doesn't want to take the time or doesn't have the time to answer your questions, that's a red flag. And you ought to think about what you want. I also had a conversation as an LP with another person, and I consider myself, I don't know, above average, maybe have an intellect, financial intellect anyhow. And he had the most convoluted capital stack I'd ever seen. And he had a piece of paper, and I'm drawing lines on it, and I just thought, this takes too much thought. My brain hurts thinking about this. Why would I want to invest in this? And so back to the know, like, and trust. It's just that I'm sure that the guy's going to be very successful in that deal. He'll make tons of money probably. But develop your own investment strategy and stick to it. Find your sweet spot, whatever it is. Maybe it's a high yield. Maybe it's a value add. Maybe it's a short-term play. Maybe it's a long-term play. Maybe it's Dallas, Fort Worth versus Shreveport, Louisiana, or something like that. Everybody's got to develop their own investment strategy.
Yeah, this is fantastic, Randy. Like, I think many people, when they start out looking to invest in real estate, there's a sense of impatience. And what I'm hearing you say is try to fight that resistance, because if you jump on board with the first person that gives you an offering, or you're not educated and you're moving around and trying to jump ahead of yourself, that's a potential to get set up for either getting hurt or getting alienated, all these different types of things. And so I think that that's super, super wise advice for those listeners out there, to just make sure you take your time, and then to go complete circle back to what you were talking about before. There's always another deal, right? There's always another investment opportunity. And so there's no reason to rush. I personally have had problems with impatience and trying to get things going and trying to force the butterfly out of the cocoon before it's time, right? And you know how that ends up. I think that that's really, really important to re-emphasize. So thank you for bringing that up.
There are people out there that want to go big, go fast. I want to go slow, go steady. I'm going back to the hare and the tortoise. Slow and steady wins the race.
Yep.
Over a long period of time. That's the difference between investing in speculation. What's the difference between investing in speculation? Well, for me, speculation is chasing the shiny object syndrome. It's when somebody offers me, hey, here's a 25% IRR, or here's a 19% IRR, and I can create a spreadsheet to make any deal look good, right? It's a matter of chasing that shiny object versus finding your comfort zone of what you're interested in investing in. And you have a relationship with a lead that you can ask questions to. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Send emails, make appointments, ask for, a half hour, make 2 half-hour appointments if necessary.
Yeah, absolutely. Very, very good advice. Thank you so much for all that good stuff. I do wanted to ask you one more thing before we head into the rapid round here. And because you're working a W-2 still, and obviously we know your background is in finance, what superpowers would you say that you've been able to translate from your W-2 and into the multifamily real estate investing world? Because there's a lot of different facets you can go down, right? As people start to learn, you understand how broad this whole investing mechanic is.
Yeah.
What would you say has helped leverage you from your W-2 into real estate investing success?
I don't know that I have any superpowers, but I would say that I will tell you the things I gravitate to as a passive investor. And I gravitate towards investments with sponsors who I rarely gravitate towards people with a corporate background. That doesn't mean somebody that isn't good. That just means that I think that corporate background gives structure, gives credibility, gives discipline, gives anybody that's working in corporate world is not afraid to have somebody look over their shoulder or ask questions, because it happens all day, every day to us. So I gravitate towards somebody that has been in the corporate world. I gravitate to people that I've known for a long time now, and I've got people that I've invested multiple times with, gone full cycle, and they send me stuff, and quite honestly, I don't do the due diligence that I probably should, because I've got the trust with them and I know their character. I'm gravitating toward yield plays versus I'll take a 7-year, I gravitate towards those yield play options that just give me slow and steady. And at the end, if we pay down debt, and even if after 7, maybe it's, everybody projects them on a 5-year hold, but if it lasts 7 or 8, who cares? As long as it's cash flow and the equity is still there in the deal, and you pay down the prepayment penalties and stuff like that. I gravitate towards sponsors that give the LPs some rights. I've seen many deals where the sponsors have all control. That's something that it's kind of a red flag, where they can decide when to buy and sell, how much to buy and sell for. There's no LP vote or anything. So I'm a nerd. I read the PPMs and the OMs, the operating agreements, for each deal if I invest in it, because there's no two alike.
Yeah, that's great. I think that right there is the answer. I think everything that you're talking about, that perspective came from your corporate world, right? Came from your background. Like all the things that you just said, what you look for, including reading the PPMs and doing your due diligence, and then getting to a point where eventually you trust the individual, not having to do due diligence. It's like gates, right? The way I would say it is that you've set up gates, and you're taking that from your corporate lifestyle, doing due diligence, and then each time shaving down on the due diligence as you build the trust. Do you think that would be an accurate way to describe all that?
I never thought of it that way, but I think it is very true. I think, and I think to me, it goes back to where I kind of started at, the difference between investing and speculation. Speculation is, here's a great deal, just throw some money at it. I trust this person unequivocally. That to me is speculation versus investing. An investor knows the deal parameters, knows the risk, can determine the probability of success with some accuracy. I mean, nothing's guaranteed, but that's investing versus speculation. And yeah, that comes from a corporate mindset.
I love that. Thank you so much. This is great. Okay, cool. Well, I think we are rounding the end of the show here. And what we're going to do is we're going to head into our rapid round. And it's actually 5 questions that we ask every single one of our guests. So if you haven't listened to the podcast before, this will be a surprise to you.
And I have listened to one other one, but let's go. I can't remember them all. I can tell you that. But
okay, these are.
I haven't pre-prepared, so
these are really tough. These are really tough. You're going to be racking your brain with these.
Okay.
Do you want to read them out?
Read them. All right, Randy. So first question is, what book has had the biggest impact on you and why? And it doesn't have to be business.
Well, that's a really easy one. Had the most impact on my life is the Bible. From a business perspective, I really will read anything John Maxwell on leadership. It's an old book now, but the 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership by John Maxwell is classic and is a really good one. So I read anything leadership, and I was just trying to find the book that I have, Mastering the Market Cycle by Howard Marks. Mastering the Market Cycle by Howard Marks. I just look at my shelf, is one I've recently devoured and really enjoy, because understanding those cycles is really important, and they're all cycles.
Do we have that book?
We don't. That's something we're
okay.
gonna be picking up.
Let's note that.
Yeah,
It's a good read.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the disappointing thing is he doesn't tell you what to do, but he generally points you towards the macro cycles and how over time they all go in cycles. And he was a mutual fund manager for, I think it was Oak, anyhow, and very successful and good read. Highly recommended.
Excellent. Yeah, we're gonna grab it. All right, and the next question is, if people wanted to emulate your success, what is the first actionable thing that they could do to follow in your footsteps?
Shoot your sights a lot higher than me. But I think the thing I would hang my hat on is education. Educate yourself. If you're not willing to invest the time in it, it's strictly speculation. You need to be an active, passive investor. Understand the deal, the risk parameters, and the only way you do that is by educating yourself. There's a ton of opportunities out there today that are free, they're low cost, they will require some time, some reading, some listening, but there's a ton of opportunities, and the rewards are there. I think over the period of time, I've only known, I'm sure there are more, but I'm most aware of Warren Buffett, who made his money off of the stock market, but I can think of 10 or so right off the top of my head that have made their fortune through real estate.
Yeah, I love that too, that you said be an active, passive investor. Yeah, that's really important.
All your listeners, I mean, otherwise it's just speculation in my mind. Or maybe you have a great friendship that you just really like the person and you can throw $50,000 at them.
And then next question is, what small thing that most people not know about you?
What small thing do people not know about me? Well, there's a lot of things people don't know about me. What small things? I guess just hopefully it's coming through, but I think the passion for this and the desire to help others along their journey. So I became a coach in Rod Khleif's organization I mentioned because I make a few bucks, but it's not the money. It's really just, there have been many people who have built into my real estate journey and my professional career. And I truly just want to give back. And it's the old Zig Ziglar comment that I can get almost anything in life I want if I help others get what they want.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
That's great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you. Number 4, how do you like to unwind and restore your creative juices individual?
I do a lot of walking, long walks. I'll walk 4 or 5 miles a day, generally, try to. So I get a lot of alone time doing that if Melanie's not with me. A lot of times we go together, but it's not every night. Or when I'm at work, I do it, try to take a 10 or 15 minute break. I do enjoy the game of golf. I get a lot of pleasure out of going out and playing a round of golf. Mm-hmm. That's enjoyable to me. Recharge too is doing spending time with family. For me, I have adult children and really enjoy getting together with them and pampering my grandchildren and spoiling them a little bit. So that's definitely recharge.
That's great. Yeah, I was going to say for this one that I know that since you live in Houston that taking a walk outside is sometimes not that simple. I've lived there for 4 years, so I know exactly what it's like sometimes in the summer in August and July. So that can be a challenge,
It becomes a workout.
It does. Yep.
And it's like take 2 steps and sweat, but
yep.
You learn to walk either early in the morning or late at night. So
that's right. And then you walk into a building and then you need your jacket because the AC is so turned down. So, all right, number 5. Is there something special that you and your family kids like to do together? I think you may have already mentioned it, but just in case, we'll ask the question here again.
Melanie and I talked about that a couple times. Kids, 2 adult kids in Denver, 1 in Seattle. It's just getting together and being together and spending time together for us. Whether we go to Denver or Seattle or they come here, it's a lot of fun to just spend time with your adult children and see them growing and maturing and becoming adults.
Of course, of course. Well, all right, Randy, thank you so much for being on the show. That is the end. But what we would like to do is we'd like to give you one last opportunity to just open forum. Just go ahead and let people know how they can find you, what you have going on right now, and anything that that the audience can do to interact with you more and just add value to them.
Appreciate that, Derek, Sophia. First of all, again, thank you for allowing me to be on your show. It's been a pleasure. The easiest way to get a hold of me is invest-arc.com. That's my website, invest-arc.com. There's a contact us page on there. There's a calendar on there too. Make an appointment. Love to chat with you about anything real estate or anything else for that matter, if it can add value. So just want to expand the network, and I'm always looking at deals. And if there's a possibility that you may be interested in investing, I'd love to talk with you too.
Excellent. That sounds fantastic. And I think all of that is available on your website, as well as the portfolio that you've invested in and managed properties. So very impressive what you have built out there. So I would encourage all the listeners to go out there and take a look as well. And for those of you who have listened all the way to the end, we want to thank you specifically, Sophie and I, for listening, because we really think that this is a very powerful way to create passive income and start living a life of choice. And so people like Randy is a living example of how to do this. And so please get yourself educated. We at Elevate Equity, we have so much material for you. We have other podcasts, we have books, we have blog posts, we've got all these things ready to go. And we may actually be coming out with a course sometime soon as well. And so
Nice.
we really want to help you. We want to engage with you. And so if you guys like, please go to elevateequity.org. And then also wherever you're listening to this podcast, please like and subscribe it, because as we like to say, we want to get those algorithm gods to move us up the chain so that we're able to get more exposure to more people. So please engage with us, and please be honest too. We want your honest feedback so we can get better. And with that being said, I think that's everything for today's show. So this is Derek.
And this is Sophie.
We are signing off. Thank you so much for listening, you guys. Take care.